Welcome to the Bible Guy and a continuation of the lessons from the World Discipleship Summit. Now we reach our third lesson from my time at the summit, and today, living a cross-shaped life in our relationships. Where did I get this title from? Well, one of the words I'd seen mentioned quite a lot at the conference, the type of lessons that we would be learning about, and this word that kept coming up was cruciform. And I thought, cruciform, I've heard this, I've got a general idea what it's about, but I had to look it up a bit and find out a bit more about what does this mean, cruciform. And there's different ways to look at it, but I want to look at it in terms of relationships. And one of the descriptions that I liked was cruciform is just the life of Jesus taking shape in us. So, like for me, the way of the cross came to mind, or specifically the way of living like Jesus, which obviously resulted in the way of the cross. So, becoming more and more like Jesus, cruciform is like a cross-shaped life. But the question I had then today on the back of that, and in reference to the conference that I was at, in terms of the content of some of the lessons and the conversations I had in terms of cruciform, cross-shaped life, was the question or the thought of how do I live a cross-shaped life in my relationships, especially on the back of the last video about unity. As I said, not heard much of this before, but it's all about taking the way of the cross. And I am preaching on this very passage I'm going to look at now on Sunday. So I may also mention this idea of cruciform cross-shaped life. So Philippians chapter 2, and we'll read from verse 1. If you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any fellowship with the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and purpose. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. Each of you should look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. Your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. He would go on to say he became obedient to death on the cross. God exalted him to his right hand because of this attitude that Jesus had. And Paul's calling the Christians at Philippi here to have the same mindset, the same attitude, be of one in spirit with Christ. But not just in a general sense here in Philippians 2. You'll notice the theme here. Link my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and purpose. Do nothing out of selfish ambition. Consider others better than yourself. Look to each other's interests. The whole point about the cruciform living here, the cross-shaped life, being like Jesus, in this passage here, was all in reference to relationships. It is obviously important to live a cross-shaped life in our Christian lives, but here it's specifically to do with relationships, and that's why I want to look today, living a cross-shaped life in relationships. I mean, we just read this, and I'm sure you've read this before. Your attitude should be the same as Christ Jesus. Although he was God, he didn't consider equality with God at all something to be grasped, and he took the nature of a servant after making himself nothing. There's only one outcome that we can have when we read this, I feel, and anyone that doesn't say this is probably not telling the truth. This is hard. This is very hard. This is a high standard. When I mention the things about Christianity that are difficult, I often talk about lust and loving your enemies and forgiveness. I forget this one. We're called to be like Christ in our relationships, take the nature of a servant and become nothing, and again, be out to serve others. This is hard. Now, what I would say before I look at that for myself a little bit more is, it is hard, but don't beat yourself up. If you've been around the kingdom for a long time, if you've been a Christian a long time, you've probably came back to this lesson time and time again. And I've no doubt in our lives that we've all got good examples where we have been like this. But it is something we're called to do, as Thessalonians talks about, more and more. Well, the way you're living, do it more and more. So I applaud us as Christians. If you've been around a long time and you're living a faithful life, you have no doubt displayed this level at some point or another where you've been a servant to your brothers and sisters. And I applaud us all on doing that, but I call us to do it, as the scriptures do, more and more. What gets in the way of this for us? Being like this, taking the way of the cross in our relationships. What stops us? And I had thought about this for myself, and I thought, what is it that prevents me from being more of a servant, from making myself nothing, from putting other people's needs ahead of my own? What is it now, especially as I lead the church here in Belfast, what is it that prevents me from doing that? And I thought there are maybe several things. But one of the things that comes to mind for me pretty quickly is that I can be results orientated. Comes from my life and my background and my training background. And it's a good thing. I'm competitive and I'm driven and I go after things. That's a good thing. But it can have that slant where you're goal orientated that can be a bad thing, especially in relationships. Goals are good, but not always in relationships. And I find myself thinking about, if I do go and give to this person or serve this person, or if I forgive that person of what they said and I don't bring it up again, or if I fail to mention some things that I might discourage someone even though I think they're right, and all these things where you feel like you're doing what's better for someone than what you want to do, I think, well, yeah, but what's the outcome going to be? What is there a good outcome from that? What's that going to produce? So that can be getting in the way for me sometimes. And sometimes that might be the right thing. But very often I have to maybe put aside results, outcomes, and think, what's best for this person? How can I live a cross-shaped life in my relationships where I take the attitude of a servant, where I serve someone, where I put their needs ahead of my own, where I make myself less, or in that case of Jesus, occasionally make yourself nothing, which is very hard. I'm sure you'll absolutely agree with me. So that's the thing that gets in the way for me. What is it that gets in the way for you? What is it that stops you living a cross-shaped life in our relationships? What is it that stops you doing that? Have a thought and let me know what you come up with, or give me a shout if you struggle to figure out what that is. There are other things for me. Just a couple of practicals before we finish about how to live a cross-shaped life in our relationships. A couple of things to think about. The first thing I'd say, this is challenging. Ask other people how much of a servant they see you as. Do they see you as a servant? Is there ways that they think that you're seen that way or not seen that way, or how could you grow in that way? How do other people see you? Hard to ask, isn't it? Especially those closest to you. But ask, how does other people see you in reference to living a cross-shaped life in relationships? You may need to fill them in if you start with that question as to what do you mean by that? The second thing, this hasn't helped me today when I thought of not beating myself up about the fact that you can always do better in this area. And that's why this is a challenging one, because no matter where you're at, you always know you can do better. So don't beat yourself up. Just take a good example of someone around you. I've got someone in my mind right now, someone who, for me, is so quick to give up whatever they're doing to go and serve. And the other sign for me of this person is that they don't look for credit. They don't even need other people to know the things that they're doing. I'm very quick to let people know when I'm busy. Sometimes it's so that people will not make me more busy. But again, this person doesn't always do things like that. They've got other people's needs. I do as well, but they've got their needs ahead of their own. Sometimes I maybe don't. So I've got good examples in my life. So ask other people what you're like in this area and take a good example from your life around you and maybe give them a little bit of a credit for it as well, although they're not looking for it, of course. And the last thing, just think then of what it would look like when you live a cross-shaped life in your relationships, or maybe even just one relationship this week. Take one relationship this week and take the path, a cruciform path, the cross-shaped actions this week in that relationship. What would that look like? Are you going to go and help someone without telling anyone else? Are you going to go and do something for someone that they didn't know you would do? You'll do it, maybe let them know or maybe not let them know. Go out of your way to help someone. Go over and above what would be expected. Or take an action or serve in the church or just do something in relationships that maybe people didn't expect and you'll not get any credit for it necessarily either. So hopefully some of this has made us think today. Let me know your thoughts in this. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Please hit the like button. Please share this on for other people. And let's get his word out there.